Hey, everybody. We've been talking a lot about how to sell to companies. What we haven't talked a lot about is how companies buy internally, how they make these decisions both politically, administratively, and technically. And that's what I'm going to do a couple of episodes. I'm not sure I'm going to call it a series or not, and whether to put them back to back just so that they're easy to track. But I think this topic is critical, because we think that the company is this well-organized, structured machine, and it's not. Buying and changing the way they do business is an unnatural act, but yet it is something that we have to either learn how to do or hope that they can figure it out, or it just doesn't happen. And this is what people call no decision or status quo. And what it really is a naive perception from both the salesperson's standpoint and the buyers. When we say buyers, we say the customer, because the people want what we have. They need what we have. They have the money for it. The money may not be in the right place at the right time, but they have it. I don't know about you, but I keep hearing about budget and cost, and it's like, okay, well, you get on the internet and they've got all this cash sitting around. They're hiring people like crazy. They've got money. It's true. They may not have authorization to spend it. They may not have it in the right place at the right time to put onto your stuff, but they've got the money. It's just the common, most natural excuse, and it's not really an objection. An objection is, this is why I don't want to do it, versus this is something that an excuse. I'm busy. You're busy watching TV? Is that what you're busy doing? That's pretty much as busy and cost is in sales. And as reps, we tend to get wrapped around the axle, and we always get that excuse. Let's get into this interview. I'm going to do a couple of these coming up in the next few episodes. I may space them out depending on the feedback I get from you, but I think it's critical that we understand what's going on from the other side, and how do we work with it, influence it, direct it, and make it come out for the best part for us. But before we get in, I want to make sure you're checking out Co-Video. Video emails are the way that's breaking through. This is really, everyone's talking about video now. All the marketing and the salespeople are talking about video. It's the way to connect with people. Text, email, it has kind of been beat to death. And, it's just, hey, Steve, thanks for joining us today as a way of getting started. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, Brian, I've been consulting in B2B selling for about the last 20 years, but I've actually been consulting not just on the selling side, but about half my business is on the buying side with very large companies that are trying to position and close critical deals with key suppliers, particularly ones they want a long relationship with. So I've kind of been looking at the dynamics, if you will, of this relationship from both sides. And doing so is given me, I think, some interesting insights, if you will.
Now, I certainly can understand how you'd get on the selling side. How'd you get involved on the buying side?
Well, on the selling side, we developed a company on B2B negotiations, and it was built around some of the research that started at Harvard 40 years ago. I was exposed to it when I got my MBA at Northwestern. And we really built a big reputation there. And suddenly I started getting calls from buying organizations that said, we've got to come up with a different cadence, if you will, a different way of doing business, particularly with key suppliers. This old traditional tried and true when it comes to, let's say, the negotiation, taking them out to the woodshed and beating the snot out of them, if you will, on price, that's not working for us anymore. And
Go figure.
I actually spoke to a conference with a number of chief purchasing officers there, and I had one come up to me from a really large company, and he said, we have put our business at risk because we've got mission critical suppliers that are essentially refusing to do business with us. because of the way we're negotiating with them.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what pulled me into the buying side, if you will.
And how do you help them?
Well, the interesting thing I found is while they bring me in to, help them ostensibly negotiate the deal, probably 75% of my time is taking their thinking back upstream to, wait a minute, guys, what are we trying to accomplish here? Let's not focus on the deal yet. Let's focus on what are the outcomes you want to achieve. And then let's structure what the right deal should look like based on that. And by the way, since the deal's got to work for both sides, and I do this whether I'm on the buying side or selling side, what are the outcomes in this case important to the seller? And that's where we get a lot of breakthrough thinking, and the result is a deal that's good for both sides and can further the relationship.
Yeah, because I hear it from salespeople all the time, is that they quickly get the price question, and you can't really answer it because you don't know what they want, need, or would like. It's kind of irrelevant. It's like
you're spot on.
Yeah, because every time I see a house for sale, what's the first question comes in your mind? How much is it? I'm not going to buy it.
It does. It does. But we've also kind of trained that that's going to be the cadence, okay, with customers of ours. And by the way, I find that question comes much more often from the lower level people we call on. They're operating within a budget, if you will, if they've got an initiative or a project going on. But when you're talking to the people, let's say, that own the outcomes, that are trying to actually solve something and produce results for the business, I found that the natural cadence is that conversation on price doesn't even come up until they figure out, can you really help me be successful? Do you understand me, where I'm going, that kind of thing?
And that's it. And I think as a senior salesperson, it's your job to kind of redefine that. Don't you?
It is. It's your job, I think, to have the right conversation with customers. Yes, you've got to bring them value. You can't make them feel like you're sitting there interrogating them. Nobody wants that. But let me kind of flip your question a little bit. How many people like to be sold to?
I don't think anyone likes to be sold to. People are, trying to solve a problem, create an opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
And until you get that rapport with people, it's, who are you? What do you do? What's it cost?
Yeah, exactly. But that's also when, I found that the conversation was led by the seller wanting to talk about their company, their products, their services.
Yeah.
As opposed to understanding, in general at least, what the customer's trying to achieve. And the real value in selling, at least in my experience, you bring the customer a lot of value by helping them envision potential outcomes that they weren't even thinking about. Because let's face it, we're the expert on our side, but at least we should be. And I get pulled into, by the way, a whole lot of my business is consulting with account teams on real deals, through positioning, proposing, negotiating, and closing. And, what I find is that, wait a minute, guys, if you go in and start talking about your products and services, why are you surprised when the first question is, well, what's the price? Because you set it up that way.
Yeah. Because that's the first thing that pops in the head. And I think, people call it an objection. I call it just, fill in the space.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But you made a point earlier, it's price of what?
Right.
Okay. Price of what? And I found that when you can get to the outcomes, and by the way, the motion that and again, when we're talking B2B sales, the latest research I've seen is that, you can have somewhere on the average of 7 key influencers, if not decision makers, on the buying side, particularly if it's a fairly complex deal, fairly large. These people aren't all aligned.
Not at all.
And how do we help them get aligned? Because we're only doing one deal. We're not doing one deal with IT and another with operations and another with legal. And, there's just going to be one deal. So how do we tackle all of that uncertainty that's on the buying side? And a point I'd like to make, and by the way, I hear the same refrain from my selling clients. It's getting harder and harder. It's more complex. But what I think they don't appreciate is it's getting even much more harder on the buying side.
Yeah.
To make an informed buying decision. Because as sellers, look, we sell for a living. But what we often forget is customers don't buy for a living.
Yeah, right. They didn't go to buy what I call decision-making school.
Yeah.
No one has a workshop on that.
No, not at all. And so one of the really powerful things that I get my clients to utilize right off the bat is, let's get the potential outcomes out there, but to help the customer become aligned internally, let's present them with some thoughtful options. And I call these multiple acceptable options. We're prepared to accept any one of them, but we believe each one is going to have a very different value proposition to this customer. And we tee them up as, look, based on our conversations to date, here are some thoughts on how we might move forward. And let me explain them to you, and then let the customer tell us which one's most attractive.
And that's it. And what kind of surprises did you find, helping people make buying decisions? Mm-hmm. I'm sure that was an adventure.
Well, no, it is. But the surprising thing is particularly when you're dealing with the people who own the outcomes, they're on the hook to produce the results. They want to have options and they want to have that conversation because their goal is to make an informed decision.
Yeah.
And what I have found is that, you could have sales cycles that last 6 to 9 months. But when you get to this pivotal point and you tee up options and you have the right people in the room on the customer side, in a 1 hour time frame, you're going to learn more than you learn that whole sales cycle. Because they're going to open up and start talking, and talking about what they like about this one or what might be missing. And don't get me wrong, when we tee the options up, 99% of the time, the final deal that gets done is some combination of those three.
Yeah.
But here's the critical thing. Once it becomes the customer's deal, and that's what's happening, we're inviting them in to help construct the right deal. Once it becomes their deal, that's when sales cycles shorten dramatically. And that's when deals get done, because that's what they want to do, is make an informed decision, deploy the technology or the solution that you've got, and start generating the outcomes. And then they want to move on because they got their business to run.
Yeah. And how often do you see flip-flopping where the priorities shift, like a deck of cards where they're just being shuffled?
Yeah. Oh, no. But look, over a 6 to 9 month sales cycle, the other thing that you can count on is not only is there uncertainty and risk because of all the players on the buying side, but things are going to change. And if you've set up the right cadence, when something changes, it's like, okay, the first thing I would ask is, okay, based on this change, what is now most important to you? Yeah. Okay. And then let's tee up some options and let's just keep the same cadence going. And it's a great way to manage the change and the risk. I mean, it's funny. I've got a client in Saudi Arabia, and there, at least for what my client sells, they basically got two, enterprise customers. You got Saudi Aramco and Saudi Telco. And both of these customers now are conditioned to the point when something changes, there's a new initiative, whatever it may be, they call my client up and say, okay, look, here's what's changed, or here's what's new. Here are the things we believe are important to us that we're trying to accomplish. We'd like you all to come down and present us with some of those options so we can all talk about it and figure out what's the best way to go.
Yeah.
Now, that's a cadence I'd love to have. with any customer.
But it's really that organized, isn't it?
Well, I'm going to push back on that a little bit because being on both sides of the table, there's two fundamental questions I have, and that is one, why does it have to be so hard? And two, why does this thing called negotiations have to be contentious? Where's that written in stone?
Yeah.
Because the truth is, when you have this conversation with them, particularly with the options, the negotiation is happening, and it doesn't feel that way to anybody. And I'll give you an example. I've got another client that uses this approach, and they do really complicated deals. They bring their customers into their boardroom. You got a big mahogany table. You got an overhead LCD. They put the options up and explain them, and they're shining on a whiteboard. And then they hand their customer the marker.
Yeah.
And say, would you tell us first, of these three, which one is most attractive to you? And they'll go up and circle it. And then the next question they ask is, how could it be improved?
Those are great questions, huh?
And geez, well, we'd really like to reduce this a little bit. Well, okay, we could do that, but if we change that, we'd also need to change this. Is that okay? And in about an hour's time, okay, they work through these really complex deals, and they tell their customer, they take a picture of it, and they say, tomorrow morning, you'll have on your desk a formal proposal from us with everything in it that we just discussed. And your customers love it because it's their deal.
Yes. Yeah. And let's talk about that, because what are the great salespeople doing to kind of control and herd the cats within the customer side? Because I think that's what, as reps, what we want to do.
Well, it is. And it's first, the great ones recognize, something, everybody on their side's not aligned.
Yeah.
And one of my goals is to get them aligned, okay, quickly on where they're going. The second thing that the great people do is they don't come walking in the door with the answer. Okay. Your prescription pad with your company logo on it, and, you're ready to heal them, man. This product, this service, whatever it may be. Rather, they come in the door with the right questions. And particularly, I find this is really challenging with my technology clients because they've been trained over and over about, the features, functions, et cetera, of what they're selling. And man, they are teed up and ready to go to town talking about the product. And when I get pulled into these deals, I'm like, okay, so you're telling me this product's the answer. What was the question?
Right.
And they don't know. Okay.
Well, that's it, because the feature, one feature turns into the most important thing. Then tomorrow, the next feature turns into the most important thing.
And how sustaining is that, by the way, when, your life cycle of a particular product now is coming down to months.
Yeah.
Or your competitive advantage for a new feature is, somewhere in the same time frame. That's not sustainable. But at the end of the day, what is sustainable is if you are inviting the customer in and letting them know they get a voice in shaping what is the right deal for them. And we haven't talked about it, but, the most important thing, by the way, to the customer is not the selling and the proposing and the negotiating. For them, this is a necessary evil, and it's painful. Make it easy for those things to happen, because what the customer really cares about is that you deliver the promised value after the sale.
And it comes back to trust, right? Because until you have that trust, they don't believe what you say, and they look at you as a commodity, and they want to look at you as a commodity.
Well, actually, no, I'll push back and say they don't want to look at you as a commodity. Unfortunately, we make it easy for them to look at us as a commodity. So let's talk a minute about trust. What makes a customer trust you?
What I've experienced is you showing more interest in them than in yourself.
Exactly. They trust you because of what you know about them,
Yeah.
what they're trying to accomplish, what's important to them. And then there's a very close cousin, if you will, to trust, which and many salespeople kind of confuse the two, and I get it because they're closely related, but it's called credibility. And see, you're credible when you've been there and done that. And if it's an existing customer, if they bought from you in the past, you've delivered on the value.
Yeah.
They've seen it. If this is a brand new logo you're trying to sell to, what I see so many selling organizations do is they put up what I'll call their NASCAR slide. And I'm sure you've seen it.
Yeah.
Here's all the companies, that have bought our services.
Social proof. Yeah.
Well, that's not relevant to this
They
customer,
don't care.
okay? If
like
you
the
weren't
office.
solving similar problems and producing similar outcomes that they were looking for, I found you just need to give them a couple of examples. And they don't have to be in the same industry, by the way. I hear that all the time. Well, they need one in the same industry. I go, no. What they need to know is that you've tackled similar problems and produced outcomes, just
Yeah.
like they're trying to. Those are the things that involve trust. And I find so many B2B salespeople, they flip it. They say, well, I have to have a relationship first. And my experience is, no, the relationship happens after. Okay.
Yeah. You have to
After
have
you
rapport.
followed through and delivered on it. Okay.
Yeah.
And so you gotta flip the script, if you will, in terms of the way you come after it.
Yeah. I think too many people confuse rapport with relationship.
Yes, exactly. And many times they'll want to fly their executives in to meet with the customer executives, and I go, okay, why do they want to meet with us?
Yeah.
Well, they'd like to have a relationship, and I go, no, they don't. Okay, these are really busy people, and if they need a friend, buy them a puppy. Okay, what they really need are people they can count on to
Yeah.
get in the boat with them and row in the same direction. And the relationship happens afterwards.
And I think that's a key point because I'd say 80% of my success in selling was instead of just doing the demo proposal like my competitors would do,
Mm-hmm.
I would drag in the product and an engineer. And for 2 weeks, we would integrate it into their system.
Yeah, try it.
Yeah. And all of a sudden, we're going out to dinner every night. We're getting to know each other. We're surfacing all the issues. And just by blocking out their time, you were able to build that trust.
Yes, but again, you were focused on them.
Them, yeah, because
And,
no one
and
cares about me.
yeah, well, no, they don't care about you, and they don't care about the technology per se.
No.
Okay, it's just an enabler or the solution or whatever it is you're selling. It's just the enabler to produce the results that they're looking for. But no, I mean that's a terrific cadence. I'll tell you. I mean, I've got a lot of hot buttons. One of them, and this is really common in the technology sales arena. Proof of concept (POC).
Yep.
And I can't tell you how, it's a terrific opportunity to completely change the conversation. And yet what it devolves into is to a bits, bytes, feature function conversation. And many times on the buying side, if you're talking to the wrong people, this is just a tire kicking exercise, or a shiny object that they want to play with. Whereas if you did it the right way, because most POCs have success criteria. Okay, well, first off, let's talk about if you implement the best solution in the world, what are the different outcomes you want to achieve? And then now let's take those outcomes, let's map them back to this particular solution. What should be the success criteria that we're both looking at, okay, to ensure you'll get those outcomes? And now you're using it as a forcing function, if you will, to have the right conversations.
Now, what would you recommend salespeople do? I mean, I'm sure you spend a lot of time on the sales side. What do you see done wrong most often? And if there was one thing that they could do, what would that be?
Wow. Okay. I have a hard time with one thing, okay, but I will finish with one thing.
I
Let me
know.
give you the four things that I see consistently. Number one, you don't present the customer with what I call an irresistible value proposition that's all about them and what they're trying to achieve and to get them excited about buying from you.
Yeah.
Okay, that's the first big mistake. The second one is you send them a proposal that runs the gamut of a two-page quote that's just a listing of products and indecipherable SKUs and acronyms with prices and quantities on them. Okay,
Yeah.
that's one end of the proposal. The other end is you send them a young novel, okay, that's all about you, your products. It's filled with slick diagrams and things. It's more of a marketing material than anything else. Neither one of those helps them make a decision because they can't connect the dots to, wait a minute, why is this stuff in here and how does it relate to what I'm trying to accomplish? That's the second thing. The third one is when it comes to the negotiation, you're not ready to negotiate. You know they're going to tell you the price is too high and you don't have a response to that, okay, that's rational and reasonable and thought out and et cetera. And then the fourth big thing we do wrong is we're trying to sell to the existing customer, and that customer doesn't know the value they've gotten from previous buys.
Yeah.
So why are they excited about buying now? You know, those are the big four, Brian, that have come out from my work on the buying side. It's like we don't have to solve world hunger here, but if we can just get four things right, we're going to look so much different than everybody else. And so now to answer your question in a more succinct way, how about giving them a proposal that makes it easy for them to buy and feel like they're making an informed decision? How about using your proposal as a strategic weapon if you really want to look different than everybody else out there? And the one that I use, by the way, is 7 simple slides. And I've had clients use this on deals from 20K to deals north of $1 billion. The decision was made on 7 simple slides. Now there was a great big thick contract and everything that followed. That's obviously natural, but for the key decision makers, it distills it down to the right conversation so that they can make an informed decision, and that's all they want to do.
Yeah. And to do these things, you have to be proactive, meaning I think
Yes.
we fall into the reactive trap of, trying to make the number, trying to, make the CRM look the way the manager wants to, which falls into those 4 things that people do. Right?
Well, it forces those 4 things,
Yeah.
right? And it forces a lot of unnatural acts, particularly we're coming up on the end of usually a quarter for most of selling people. And this is when we start doing, the blue light specials and everything else. And, you've seen them, I've seen them 1,000 times. My experience is 95% of these issues go away if you have a robust, qualified pipeline. Unfortunately,
Well, that's a whole nother problem, right?
That's another problem for another day. But I'll tell you where a lot of that pipeline is sitting. It's sitting with your install base.
Oh, that's the easy stuff, right?
Well, it is, and it'd be even easier, and the opportunities would be larger if we just did that 4th issue I told you, which is let's go make sure we deliver the value and get credit.
Yeah.
And man, you want to see opportunities coming your way. That's where they're going to come. Because look, they're not in the business of buying. And if they've got somebody who's delivering, they got new issues that come up or new initiatives, you're going to be the first one that they approach on it.
Cool. Hey, Steve, this has been a great conversation. Tell us a little bit about your book and where people can connect with you.
Sure. Well, Brian, I've got the 3rd book in my series, which is called The Compelling Proposal. Actually comes out next week on June 11th. It'll be on Amazon. You can get it in ebook format as well as in paperback. And you can, reach out to me. You can certainly connect via LinkedIn. My website is valuelifecycle.com. And my email is steve at lifecycle.com. And by the way, if we do connect, for the folks that both my followers and connections on LinkedIn, next week, when the book launches, I'm going to be running a special for a week. My publishers agreed to it. It'll be 99 cents to download the ebook.
Cool. I think this is the key element of sales reps who really get to the next level. We all can place an order or process an order. We can all answer a client's questions. We're all really trained on our products. But what we're not trained on is how companies buy and how to manipulate and influence that process. Because if you don't know how to do that, you're understanding the 10% of sales instead of the 90% of sales. This is what I learned early in my career. And what drove me was I put it 2 days into the presentation and the demo. I did all this planning. I'd fly out there and it would go flawlessly and nothing would happen. And it wasn't just losing the deal, it was losing that time. I hated wasting time and all that energy. And yeah, you get a base salary. And I know some of you are happy being employees. But the days of sales reps being employees and having that employee mindset are coming to an end. Because guess what's happening? Quotas are being raised. Everyone's gaming your comp plan. Meaning that what they're assuming is that they can trick you. What we have to do is have the upper hand. And how do you have the upper hand? Ask yourself, if you quit tomorrow, how many hoops would your manager jump through to keep you? Will they cook the comp plan? Will they give you a bonus? Will they do anything to keep you? If they won't, guess what? You're an employee. You're a cog in the wheel. If they think they can replace you by the next person that comes by, guess what? Not much value. I heard a podcast where a sales manager goes, I hired people right out of college. And you're like, that's not a salesperson. That's service. That's somebody reading off a script. And nothing against people coming out of college. I was once one too. But I had no game. It takes probably, without anybody really mentoring you, probably 5 years to become a B player, to become more than just an order taker, more than just somebody who's okay at handling a customer and guiding them. And if you're not developing, and guess what? The company's not going to do it. They're going to give you a 20-year-old training course or some bonehead, pothead on YouTube who, sold in the 90s telling you, hey, here, do a bash show email, man. Yeah, guess what? Or some failed SDR who couldn't make it at a company and goes out and does a training course. That's not really selling. Those are skills. They're touch points. They're best practices. What you need is your whole game, your whole process. And you got to understand what you're up against. How do companies buy? And guess what? You need somebody who did it forever and is passionate about it and loves to talk about it, loves to help reps do it. And I happen to know that person personally. So if you want to learn how to do that, you want to double your income at minimum, you want to get to the point where you have the leverage over the company, where the company feels the loss when you leave versus you feel the loss. That is what the courses are all about. So go to b2brevenue.com, schedule a time to talk about it. You can look through the courses. There's two major ones. There's Start the Conversation, Get the Meeting. This will tell you how to get into almost any account. I have a strategy and a process and a system that'll get you in. I break it down into tiny little pieces, and it's not just knowing, it's how you do it. So you get tons of one-on-ones. You get tons of office hours. Right now, there's probably about 75 hours of office hours. But doesn't mean you have to listen to all of them. But you get to hear people from different industries and how they're doing it and crushing it right now. The other course is Closing the Complex Sale. This talks about how companies make this decision, how to come up with your game, your roadmap, your map to money, and your system to systematically win deals and not get stuck where all the deals get stuck. It is an unnatural act for companies to buy. Yes, you might have an existing customer and you can upsell them. That's pretty Easy relative to getting into a new account. But you have to look at your number. How are you going to crush your number? It's going to be on those marginal deals. Now, your company sets you up to be 53% of your quota. That's how it works today. That's what everyone's telling them. That's what it comes down from the board. That means it's gamed against you. That means your quota is almost twice what they really believe and will invest in you making. So that's what it's set up and playing against you. So what you have to do is outsmart them, becoming so good at sales that they will do anything to keep you. And that's where you need to be. If you have the employee mentality, smile and nod and go to the meetings, fill out your CRM and your forecast, and go home at 5:30. I get it, but you're not going to go anywhere with that. You're not going to make the income that you want. If you want to make $500, $750, or $1 million in B2B sales, that's what's possible. Search the internet. I am not making this crap up. This is real stuff. It is the best kept secret out there because you don't need a college education. You don't need a graduate degree. You don't need an MBA. What you do need to do is learn how to sell and how companies buy and follow that process. And you're not left alone. You get a year access to the content, but you get unlimited 30-minute one-on-ones with me where we talk about applying the course to exactly your situation and how to prevent the bad things from happening and ensure the good things will happen. Come up with a couple of options and work through what do you think is going to happen with each. And that is where the fun is. I love talking to people about deals and hearing them crush it. When they get into a new account and they close a big deal, that is what juices me. And you get to hear other people going through it. And office hours every other Friday per course. So every Friday, I'm up there and I spend the whole week planning out an office hours and helping people get into new accounts and closing their big deals. So go to B2B Revenue if you're interested. If you're not interested, you can just stop the podcast and quit whining. I just want to fill everybody in on the courses. If you're in the courses already, make sure you're checking out the one-on-ones. Those are the gold where you see peers like you solving particular problems, whether it's a tool or an approach, a strategy, a contextual situation. That's it. Make sure you're checking out the Sales Questions podcast as well. If you have a sales question, you can either email it to me or in-mail me over on LinkedIn, and I try and get them out as fast as I can. And also, if you're in leadership, the B2B Revenue Leadership Podcast, check that out. And a lot of managers are saying, hey, Brian, will you just coach my reps? I go, get them in the course because they got to understand the sale first before, because everybody comes to me and is like, okay, they won't call me back. What do I do? Well, let's take a step back and prevent them from not calling you back. I got into this argument with some idiot on LinkedIn this week. He was, I love follow-up. If you don't follow up, no one will buy. I go, I never follow up. I haven't followed up in 20 years. Why? Because I know what I'm doing. I guide the customer exactly through the decision-making process, and I don't go, hey, what's going on? Just touching base, checking in, seeing what's up. Any status? Anything I can do for you? Guess what? No. If there's something you can do for me, I call you. We have to understand how companies buy and get out of this service reaction mode and getting into the proactive selling mode. That's it. We'll see you next time.